Hello. I'm Lorene. At the last family gathering, my sister dragged me by the hair across the stone patio while my parents stood by and laughed. They told the world I was crazy, bitter, jealous, while they erased me from photos, rewrote a will, and claimed a legacy that was never theirs. They edited me out of a life I had bled to belong to. But the dead don't stay quiet. My grandmother left behind more than memories, she left proof. Now what happens when the woman they buried with secrets starts speaking again? Do you still call it family when your own blood tries to silence you? When I pulled into the long driveway of my sister's rented estate in Fort Worth, the sun was already sliding low behind the line of pecan trees. The house looked like something out of a magazine. White columns, tall windows, trimmed hedges that probably cost more to shape than I earned in a month back when I was teaching. My palms were slick on the steering wheel. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, trying to convince myself that I could handle this day. It had been a year since Grandma Ione passed. I told myself this was about honoring her memory, not about Maylise or my parents. Still, deep down, I knew that every family gathering was a test of how invisible I could be before someone reminded me of it. I stepped out of my old Honda and smoothed the wrinkles from my skirt. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean. I carried a small photo album, something I'd spent nights assembling. It held pictures of me with Grandma from when I was a child, ones nobody else had bothered to keep. As I walked up the stone path, I could already hear laughter inside, that specific kind of laughter that carried both joy and arrogance. When Maylise opened the door, her face tightened into what I recognized as her polite smile, the one she used for people she didn't respect but needed to impress. "Lorene," she said, stretching my name like it didn't fit her mouth. "You made it." "Of course I did," I replied, forcing warmth into my voice. "This is for Grandma." She stepped aside, letting me pass without touching me. The living room looked like a showroom, silver-framed photos, floral centerpieces, banners that read Legacy of Ione in gold script. I scanned the walls, no pictures of me anywhere. Not one. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. My parents stood near the dining table, greeting guests. When my mother noticed me, she waved with that half-smile that said, "Don't cause a scene." My father just gave a short nod, already distracted by Maylise's husband chatting with one of his business associates. I tried to blend in, keeping to the edge of the room. A cousin asked about Tulsa if I was still doing that little teaching thing. I smiled politely. "Not lately," I said. "I took care of Grandma in her final months." The cousin nodded like I'd confessed a failure. After a while, I found a quiet spot near the staircase and waited for the moment to give my father the gift. When the guests began shifting toward the dining area, I approached him. "Dad," I said softly, "I brought something for you for Grandma's memorial." He turned, distracted, holding a glass of white wine. "Later, honey," he said, eyes already following Maylise across the room. But I persisted, holding out the small frame. "It's just—" Before he could reach for it, Maylise appeared. "What's that?" she asked, taking it from my hands before I could stop her. She looked down at the photo, me, maybe 6 years old, sitting on Grandma's lap under the sycamore tree. Her mouth curled into something sharp. "You think this pity present makes you part of this?" The room went quiet. Someone near the kitchen coughed. Maylise tore the photo from the frame, the paper ripping with a sound that felt louder than it should have. She snapped the wooden frame in half and dropped it into the trash can by the door. "Maylise," my father hissed, but it sounded more like a reflex than a rebuke. I felt my face flush hot, but I stood still. "It was just a photo," I said quietly. "Exactly," she replied. "Just a photo. Not history." A few relatives chuckled uncomfortably. No one looked at me. I swallowed hard, then turned toward the hallway. "Excuse me," I muttered. My mother said nothing. She only lifted her glass, as if to signal that this wasn't her problem. In the powder room, I ran cold water over my hands until they stopped shaking. I looked at myself in the mirror, hair pinned too tight, lipstick fading. I whispered, "You can survive this, Lorene." When I stepped out, the hallway was empty, but I could feel eyes following me from the living room. I tried to make my way toward the door. Maybe I could slip out quietly, drive back to Tulsa before nightfall. But before I reached the foyer, a hand clamped around my arm. Maylise. Where do you think you're going? She hissed. I'm leaving, I said, steady but low. I didn't come here for this. She smirked. Oh, you came here to remind everyone you exist? Mission accomplished. I pull my arm free. You don't have to prove anything, Maylise. That must have stung, because she stepped closer, eyes sharp, voice rising. Don't talk to me like we're equals. I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my hair, yanking me backwards so hard I stumbled. Gasps echoed from the living room. Before I could react, she dragged me across the hallway toward the back door. The glass rattled as she shoved it open. You filthy lowlife who doesn't belong here, she shouted, loud enough for the entire house to hear. The evening air hit my face. I tried to steady myself, but my knees scraped the patio stone as I fell. I heard the laughter, faint but real, coming from inside. My parents stood by the door, silhouettes against the light. My father's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. My mother shook her head, not at Maylise, but at me. A flash went off somewhere. Someone was recording. The shame burned deeper than pain. I pushed myself up, brushing dirt from my knees. Are you done? I asked quietly. My voice trembled, but didn't break. Maylise stared at me, chest heaving. For a moment, I saw something, fear, maybe, or confusion, behind her anger. But it vanished. She turned away, waving to the guests. She's fine, she said. She just tripped. No one said otherwise. I walked across the lawn toward the street. My legs felt heavy, but my spine stayed straight. The lights from the house glowed behind me like a stage I'd finally stepped off. My palms stung from catching my fall, but I didn't look at them. I reached my car, sat inside, and closed the door. Silence. The kind that feels alive. I didn't cry right away. I just stared at my reflection in the windshield. Hair tangled, dirt on my cheek, dress torn near the hem. It was almost midnight by the time I found a cheap motel off the highway. The clerk didn't ask questions. He just handed me a key. Inside the room, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and lemon. I set my purse on the bed, then reached into it for the broken frame. The photo was crumpled, but not torn completely. Grandma's smile looked the same, steady, kind, patient. I smoothed the paper out on the bedside table. They don't get to erase this, I whispered. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazily. The hum of traffic outside lulled me, but my mind wouldn't rest. I thought of Grandma's voice, how she used to say, "You don't have to shout to be strong, Lorraine. Sometimes quiet is louder than thunder." I turned off the lamp. The room fell into shadow. My body ached, but under the ache was something sharper, resolve. Maybe they could pretend I never existed. But I knew the truth. Grandma had seen me. She'd known who I was before anyone else decided who I should be. I closed my eyes and let the thought steady me. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what to do next. Tonight, I just needed to breathe. I thought the worst was behind me that night when I left the estate, but I was wrong. The next morning, sunlight crept through the thin motel curtains, slicing across the rumpled sheets. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. For a moment, I hesitated to pick it up, dreading the inevitable. Curiosity won. The first thing I saw was a notification from social media. Maylise had posted. My chest tightened. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The image filled the screen. The family lined up in front of the house, perfectly posed beneath a banner that read Legacy of Ione. Maylise stood front and center, parents on either side of her, all smiling like the world had never held a secret between them. The caption read, "Family is everything. Grandma's spirit lives on through us all." Through us all. I blinked once, twice. I'd been there in that line. I remembered standing behind them, slightly to the right, trying not to block anyone. But in this photo, I wasn't there. The space where I'd stood had been cropped out completely, replaced by a trimmed hedge. I zoomed in to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. Nothing.
No trace.
The comments rolled in, hundreds of them. What a beautiful family. So blessed. Your mom looks amazing, Melis. Strong women raising strong women. And then one from a distant cousin. Wasn't Lorraine there too? No one replied. Within minutes, that comment vanished. I sat there, phone in hand, half expecting someone to call and explain it was a mistake. But no one did. My coffee had gone cold by the time the realization sank in. This wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. I scrolled down to another post. There was a collage of the evening, candid shots of guests laughing, toasts being made, Melis handing out custom-printed shirts with Team Ione written across the front. Each shirt had names embroidered beneath a family tree design. I remembered seeing those when I first arrived. I'd asked if I had missed a message about dress code, and Melis had laughed. There wasn't one, she'd said. We just made a few for fun. Now, seeing the photo, I spotted nearly 20 people wearing them, every cousin, aunt, and sibling. My parents had theirs tucked neatly into their jeans, names shining under the Texas sun. Everyone except me. The caption under that post read, "Our roots run deep." I closed my eyes and leaned back on the pillow. It wasn't just about a shirt or a photo, it was about rewriting the narrative. They weren't pretending to forget me, they were proving they could exist just fine without me. My phone buzzed again, another notification. I almost ignored it, but the message preview caught my attention. You don't know me, but I think you should see this. It was from someone named Valerie. Curiosity, mixed with suspicion. I opened it. Her profile picture showed a young woman, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes. I was at the memorial last night, her message began. I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to cause trouble.
But I saw what happened by the fountain.
I recorded it. A moment later, a video file appeared. My thumb hovered above it for a long time before I pressed play. The footage was shaky, recorded from behind the glass door. The sound was muffled, but the image was clear. Melis pulling my hair, shouting words I couldn't hear but already knew by heart. The laughter of my parents was faint, but unmistakable. My body hit the ground. Someone off-camera gasped. Valerie had written one more line below the video. I thought you might need this someday. I watched it twice. The second time hurt more because I wasn't watching as a victim, but as an observer. Seeing yourself humiliated through someone else's lens changes you. It hardened something inside. I replied to her, "Thank you. I appreciate your courage." She sent a heart emoji, then went offline. For a few minutes, I just sat there, phone on my lap, staring at the carpet. The hum of the motel air conditioner filled the silence. The more I thought about it, the more absurd it seemed, that I had to rely on a stranger for proof of something my own family had witnessed and ignored. By noon, I checked out of the motel. The drive back to Tulsa felt longer than it should have been. The radio played soft country songs, and each one seemed to echo something I couldn't say out loud. When I pulled into my apartment complex, the sun was sinking again, painting the brick walls orange. I carried my bag upstairs and noticed a small slip of paper sticking out of my mailbox. A delivery notice. I hadn't ordered anything. I picked up the package from the office, a padded envelope, no return address except for the initials ID. Inside my apartment, I set it on the kitchen counter, hands trembling. When I tore the seal, I found a smaller envelope inside, cream-colored, the edges worn. Across the front, written in my grandmother's handwriting, were the words, "For Lorraine, only when they've pushed you too far." I sank onto a chair, staring at it. My breath caught somewhere between fear and longing. Grandma's handwriting, rounded, deliberate, familiar. The last time I saw her write, she was making a grocery list, shaky but stubborn. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't.
Not yet.
Instead, I stood and poured myself a glass of water, pacing the small kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Outside, I could hear a neighbor mowing their lawn, the sound grounding me in ordinary life. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Melis. "You made quite the impression last night," it read. "Try not to embarrass yourself further. Family's watching." I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without replying. I placed the unopened envelope in a drawer beside the broken photo frame from the night before. They belonged together somehow, evidence of two worlds colliding, the cruelty of the living and the grace of the dead. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept replaying the video Valerie had sent, the sound of laughter echoing through my dreams. Somewhere between exhaustion and fury, I realized something important. Every act of cruelty they threw my way wasn't random. It was a pattern, a strategy. They'd built a story about who I was, the outsider, the problem, the disappointment. And every time I tried to prove otherwise, they found a way to erase me again. But now, I had proof. Not just of what they'd done, but of who they were. As the hours crept past midnight, I reached for the drawer, touched the envelope lightly, and whispered, "Not yet, Grandma. I'll open it when I'm ready." The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds. The air smelled faintly of rain. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table, scrolling through social media once more. Melis's posts were still up. The comments were still there, full of admiration, full of lies. But now I saw them differently. They weren't powerful. They were desperate. Every crop, every edit, every fake smile, signs of a family clinging to a story that no longer fit. I took a deep breath, deleted the app, and looked toward the window. Somewhere beyond those clouds, I liked to think Grandma was still watching. Maybe she knew this day would come, that I'd need to see the truth for myself before I could read her words. I wasn't ready to open the envelope yet, but I knew one thing for certain. They had pushed me too far. The envelope sat in the drawer for 2 days before I finally touched it again. It felt heavier than paper should, like it carried something that could alter everything I thought I knew. Still, I needed proof before I let myself believe it contained anything more than a ghost of comfort. On the third morning, the sky hung low and gray. I decided to walk to the library a few blocks away. My internet at home had been unreliable since the last storm, and I needed a stable connection. I told myself it was for work, checking bills, emails, but I knew better. I was looking for more of them. Clues to what else my family had twisted while pretending to honor Grandma. The library was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioning. The librarian, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, smiled as I walked in. I found a computer near the back and logged into my email. It had been months since I last checked the family thread. I typed in Ione Memorial in the search bar, expecting nothing useful. But one message caught my eye, a reply from my nephew Silas, sent weeks before the event. Attached was a small image file. Curiosity pried at me. I clicked. It was a screenshot of a group chat labeled Ione Memorial Planning, final thread. The names scrolled across the screen. Melis, my parents, aunts, cousins. Not mine. The first message read, "Should we include Lorene in the logistics?" Melis's reply, "She won't come. She never does. Let's keep it simple." My throat tightened. Another message followed from my mother. "Even if she shows up, it's better to avoid confusion. The fewer cooks in the kitchen, the better." They hadn't forgotten me. They had removed me on purpose. I scrolled through more messages. Menu discussions, music choices, a list of approved speakers. Under that list, my father had typed, "Melis will handle all remarks. She speaks best for the family." It wasn't just a family gathering, it was a production. Every smile, every prayer, rehearsed to perfection. My hands shook as I logged out. The librarian glanced over, maybe noticing the way I sat frozen, but she didn't ask questions. I closed the browser and walked out into the drizzle. The rain felt cleansing, almost deliberate. By the time I got home, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I pulled open the drawer and took out the envelope. My grandmother's handwriting was elegant, looping with steady pressure. I slipped a finger under the seal and tore it open. Inside was a single folded letter and a yellow document. The letter came first. "My dearest Lorene," it began. "If this reaches you, it means they've done what I feared. You must not doubt your place in this family. You cared for me when everyone else turned their backs. You gave me peace, and I meant for you to have something in return." My vision blurred for a moment. I blinked hard and unfolded the second paper, a photocopy of an early version of her will. My name was there. Laureen Evelyn James, beneficiary of the lake house property and personal accounts. My pulse quickened. At the bottom, in faded ink, was Grandma's signature and the date, 13 months before she passed. I sat back in my chair, the letter trembling in my hands. She had left me the lake house, the place where she taught me to fish, where she read to me by lamplight when storms knocked out the power. I remembered her saying, "This house is yours, baby. One day, it'll be where you find your peace." But I never saw that house again after the funeral. Maylise and my parents had locked it, claiming it was pending estate management. They told me it was complicated, that I wouldn't understand the paperwork. I understood now. I read on. The letter continued. "They will try to erase you. But remember, I built that house for you. It stands on my land, not theirs. Do not let them turn it into a monument for their vanity." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears finally slipping free. Her voice echoed in my mind, steady, warm, defiant. For a long time, I just sat there in silence, the rain tapping against the window like a clock ticking toward reckoning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I made tea, walked through the small apartment, and found myself standing at the window. Across the street, the neighbor's porch light flickered on. I thought of Grandma's lake house again, of summer evenings when the crickets sang, and she'd say, "You were never second in my eyes." Those words came back to me like a vow. I drifted into a memory so vivid it stole the air from the room. Grandma was sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in her shawl, a mug of chamomile tea in her hand. Her eyes had that cloudy softness from age, but her voice was sharp as ever. I was 20 then, tired from teaching and driving 2 hours every weekend to see her. She reached over and took my hand. "Laureen, you know why I kept this house?" she asked. I smiled. "Because Grandpa built it." She shook her head slowly. "Because it's the only place in this family not built on lies." The swing creaked as the wind moved through the trees. I remember her fingers tightening around mine. "You've got a good heart, but you can't expect people who hide behind mirrors to love you for being real. Don't chase their approval, it'll break you." I had laughed it off back then, but now her warning sounded prophetic. The next morning, I decided to verify everything. I found the number of a lawyer I remembered from the funeral, Mr. Henderson. He'd handled most of Grandma's legal matters. His name still sat on a crumpled business card in my wallet. When I called, his voice was faint but recognizable, older now. "Laureen, dear, I remember you. I'm sorry about what happened last year. What can I do for you?" "I need to ask about Grandma's will," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I think there may have been more than one version." He paused. "That's possible. Why do you ask?" "I have a copy dated 13 months before she died. It lists me as heir to the lake house." Silence stretched on the line. Then he sighed. "That's not the version they submitted for probate." "Are you sure?" "I remember distinctly," he said. "The final version I was shown had Maylise as the primary heir. But I never saw your grandmother sign it in person. Your sister brought it in after the funeral. I assumed she had the authority." My grip tightened around the phone. "And you didn't question that?" He hesitated. "I should have. But your father confirmed it was in accordance with her wishes, and well, families are complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. He lowered his voice. "I don't want to cause you trouble, Laureen, but keep that copy safe. If what you have is genuine, then someone changed things after your grandmother passed." After the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the papers spread across the blanket. The evidence was there, my name, her signature, the dates that didn't align. Everything pointed to manipulation. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. The rain had stopped, leaving behind that strange quiet that follows a storm. My apartment felt too small to contain what I'd just learned. They hadn't only erased me from a photograph. They'd erased me from her will, from her story, from the truth itself. I gathered the papers carefully, placed them back in the envelope, and locked it in the drawer. My grandmother's handwriting seemed to glow faintly under the lamplight. For the first time in years, my fear began to fade, replaced by something steadier, resolve. If they had the power to rewrite a will, what else had they rewritten? I kept hearing Henderson's words echo in my head. That wasn't the version they submitted. It stayed with me through the night like a splinter. If they'd managed to rewrite a legal document, what else had they rewritten? Stories, reputations, the truth itself? 2 days later, I found out. I was drinking coffee, scrolling through local news on my laptop, when Melis's name popped up on an event listing, keynote speaker, Women in Real Estate Leadership Conference, Dallas Convention Center. The title of her talk stopped me cold. Legacy, Leadership, and Family Strength. I laughed out loud, bitterly. Family strength. The irony was so sharp it made my stomach twist. My sister was about to stand on a stage and talk about unity and legacy, while she'd spent the last year tearing her own family apart. I stared at the event flyer for a long time, my pulse rising. Maybe it was foolish, but I couldn't let her speak unchecked. If she could rewrite a will, she could certainly rewrite a legacy. I decided to go. The morning of the conference, I dressed simply. Navy slacks, a soft blouse, no jewelry except for Grandma's silver ring. The sky over Tulsa was overcast, but by the time I reached Dallas, the clouds had lifted into an unforgiving blue. The convention center gleamed like glass and steel pride. I parked 2 blocks away, sat in my car for a moment, and steadied my breath. Inside, the lobby was full of women in tailored suits, heels clicking on marble floors. Posters of Melis's face were everywhere, her professional headshot, chin lifted confidently, eyes bright. Beneath it, CEO, mentor, visionary. I wanted to tear it down. Instead, I found a seat near the back of the large hall. The room buzzed with conversation, the kind that sounded polished and professional, but felt hollow. The lights dimmed, and then she walked on stage. My sister looked immaculate, hair glossy, dressed the color of champagne. Her smile stretched wide, practiced for years. "Good morning, ladies," she began, her voice confident and warm. "When I think about legacy, I think about the values our families pass down: hard work, perseverance, integrity." The audience applauded. I clenched my jaw. She continued, weaving a story about a family business built from love and sacrifice. "My grandmother taught me that you can't build anything worthwhile on resentment," she said. "You have to forgive, to lead with grace." Forgive? She'd rewritten that, too. My heart pounded as she mentioned our estate on the lake, describing how our family preserved it as a symbol of resilience. She never once said Grandma's name. Not once. I realized then that she wasn't just telling a story. She was erasing one. When she opened the floor for questions, I raised my hand before I could think better of it. The microphone runner hesitated, glancing at Melis for approval. She nodded, perhaps thinking I was another admirer. I stood. My voice carried clearly across the room. "What advice would you give someone whose family cut them out of the legacy they helped build?" A murmur spread through the audience, like wind through dry leaves. Melis froze for half a breath, then smiled. "I think we've all felt left out of something before," she said sweetly. "But family is about unity, not division." "Unity," I said, louder now. "Is that what you call rewriting Grandma's will?" A collective gasp. Color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "Excuse me?" I reached into my tote and pulled out the folded document. "This is the original copy of Ione's will. The one you didn't want anyone to see." Camera phones rose like a forest of glowing eyes. "That's not the final draft," she stammered, her voice tightening. "No," I said. "It's not. It's the truth." The moderator rushed to the stage, murmuring something about wrapping up. Melis forced a laugh, but her eyes burned with fury. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, clutching the podium. "Please, everyone, let's respect privacy." But the audience had already turned. Whispers spread fast. "Is that her sister? Did she forge a will?" I felt my pulse in my ears, but my voice stayed calm. You built a brand on integrity. Maybe start practicing it. I walked out before she could respond. Outside, sunlight bounced off the pavement, harsh and bright. I found my car, sat inside, and let my hands shake for the first time. The adrenaline buzzed in my chest, somewhere between terror and release. 10 minutes later, as I backed out of the parking lot, my phone rang. Maylise. I answered. Her voice was icy. You just destroyed everything I've worked for.
No, I said.
You did that the moment you lied. You think anyone's going to believe you over me? She snapped. You've always been jealous, Laureen. Always. That's why Grandma pitied you. I laughed quietly. If pity built that house, you shouldn't have wanted it so badly. She inhaled sharply. You'll regret this. Keep pushing, I said, my tone even. Next time, I'll bring the video. There was silence. Then a click. I exhaled slowly and drove home. The road blurred by in streaks of orange light. For once, I didn't feel small. I'd spoken the truth, and the truth had weight. That night, exhaustion settled over me, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I replayed every word, every look. There was satisfaction, yes, but underneath it, a strange ache. I didn't want to destroy her. I wanted her to admit what she'd done. As twilight deepened outside my window, my phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made my chest tighten. Silas. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, sweetheart. His voice was barely a whisper. Aunt Laureen. Yeah, it's me. I can't talk long. Mom said if I ever called you again, I'd lose everything. I swallowed hard. It's okay. You're safe. What's going on? I miss you, he said, voice trembling. And I saw something. In Mom's room. What did you see? There was a pause, then the faint sound of footsteps. I'll tell you later. I just wanted you to know. She's hiding more than you think. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding in that hollow way grief and anger mix. Whatever Silas had seen, it was big enough to scare him. And I knew, deep down, that the story wasn't finished. Not even close. The call from Silas haunted me through the rest of the night. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at my phone, trying to piece together what something in her room could possibly mean. I didn't want to pressure him. Not when Maylise clearly had him walking a tightrope, but the way his voice shook. It told me everything I needed to know. I didn't sleep. Instead, I paced. My mind kept looping through every version of what Maylise could still be hiding. She'd already manipulated a will, staged a tribute that excluded me, and turned her son into a reluctant accomplice. What could possibly be left? By sunrise, I decided to act. I packed a small bag, grabbed the sealed documents, and drove the 2.5 hours to Norman. I hadn't seen Uncle Thurman in years. Not since Grandma's funeral. Back then, he kept mostly to himself, lingering near the back row during the service, not saying much. Still, I remember him as someone who didn't say anything unless it mattered. His house sat on a quiet, tree-lined street just past the town's edge. The mailbox was rusty, the porch sagged a little on one side, and the blinds were drawn tight. I knocked. It took a minute before I heard the sound of slow footsteps, then the door creaked open just enough for me to see his face. Laureen, he said, squinting.
Unkla Schurman.
I know it's early, but can I come in? He hesitated, then nodded.
Yeah.
Come on. The inside smelled like old paper and lemon oil. He shuffled to the recliner and sat with effort. I could see the oxygen machine by his side. His skin was pale, thinned by time. I didn't waste words. I sat across from him, laid the copy of the will and Grandma's letter on the table.
She gave these to me, I said.
And I know they're real, but the version submitted after her death. Wasn't that one, he finished. I looked at him. He nodded, slow and heavy. I knew this day would come. You knew. I saw the original. This one. He tapped the paper. I was there the week she signed it. She told me directly that house was yours. said she didn't trust the others to keep it sacred. I exhaled, a tight breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Then why didn't you say anything? He closed his eyes. Because Melis came to me after the funeral. Said the family was under stress, that we shouldn't complicate things with paperwork. She said she'd make sure everything was fair. I leaned forward. And you believed her? No, he said plainly. I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. He reached to the side of his recliner and pulled out a small wooden box. He placed it in my hands. Ione made me promise to keep this. I didn't know what it would mean back then, but I do now. Inside was a folded letter, dated 6 months before Grandma died. It was signed by Thurman, a sworn statement affirming he had seen the original will, that he had heard Ione's intentions firsthand. I stared at it, throat tight. You can do what you want with it, he said. But whatever you do, make sure it's the truth that wins. I nodded slowly. Thank you. He gave a half smile. Family's supposed to lift you up, not dig a hole and throw you in. The drive back to Tulsa was quiet. I didn't put music on. I needed the silence to sort through the anger and grief and strange sense of vindication swelling in my chest. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, I knew what I needed to do. I didn't want to start a war. I wanted to stop one. I made 5 copies of Thurman's affidavit and mailed them. 2 to my parents, 2 to Melis's office and home, and 1 to a family friend who used to practice law but was now mostly retired. None of them were signed. No return address. Just 1 line typed neatly on the first page. Stop. Or this goes public. That same evening, I called my old friend Sarah, an attorney who now did estate mediation in Oklahoma City. I need to ask you something hypothetically, I said. She laughed. Is this the kind of hypothetical that ends in court? Possibly. I explained carefully every piece. The will. The altered version. Thurman's testimony. The sealed letter. When I was done, there was a long pause. Do you want revenge, Laureen? She asked. No, I said. I want what's mine. And I want the lies to stop. She was quiet again, then said, If what you're telling me is true, you have a case. A good one. But it'll get messy. I've lived in their mess for years. This time, it'll be their turn. We agreed to talk more after the weekend. The next few days passed like a slow-moving storm. No one called. No one responded. It felt like the silence before an avalanche. I tried to stay grounded, took walks, kept a journal, even cooked real meals instead of living on takeout. But my mind kept circling the same questions. Would they back down? Would they fight? Would they finally tell the truth? On Thursday, the first crack appeared. A news alert popped up on my phone. Local real estate firm under investigation for financial discrepancies. Melis's company. I opened the article. It was vague, but it mentioned irregularities in estate management, inflated asset reporting, and pending inquiry into falsified documentation. There were no names, but I knew. A few hours later, an anonymous message arrived through a secure email account I hadn't used in months.
No greeting.
Just 5 words. You don't know what you've started. I stared at the screen. My heart thudded once, then steadied. They were wrong. I did know. And I knew I couldn't stop now. The message sat on my phone screen like a warning light. You don't know what you've started. But I did. And I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in my life, the fear of being erased was smaller than the fire of being lied about. It didn't take long for the counterattack to arrive. By Monday morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop, friends texting screenshots, old coworkers tagging me with sympathy emojis, strangers asking if I was the sister. Melis had gone public. She'd posted a long statement on Facebook, the kind people draft carefully and pretend came from a heart. The first line read, It breaks my heart that someone I love would spread lies about our family's legacy. She went on about jealousy, betrayal, mental health struggles, and financial desperation. Then came the photos, cropped screenshots from old text messages, pieces of emails, things taken out of context. One image was of me crying at Grandma's funeral. Her caption read, This is what guilt looks like when you turn your back on family. The comments poured in fast. Ignore the haters. You've worked too hard to let anyone bring you down. Some people just can't stand seeing others succeed. I scrolled through them, one by one, my stomach turning. She'd rewritten the story again, and this time she had an audience clapping for her performance. I didn't reply. Not yet. I took screenshots of everything, comments, likes, names of the ones who shared it.
I didn't need revenge.
I needed receipts. By afternoon, the post had over 2,000 reactions. I knew better than to argue online. It would only feed her narrative, but I also knew silence would let her control the story. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, papers spread around me. Grandma's letter, the will, Thurman's affidavit, the still frame of me being dragged outside. The hum of the refrigerator filled the apartment. Outside, a thunderstorm gathered, clouds heavy over Tulsa. For years, I had let them define me, the failure, the charity case, the mistake. I'd swallowed their words to keep the peace. But peace built on lies is just a slow kind of poison. I opened a new folder on my computer and named it Legacy of Ione, the truth. I uploaded the video first. Watching it again was like swallowing glass, but I forced myself through it. Then I added the affidavit, the metadata showing the will edits after Grandma's death, and copies of every message I'd saved. When it was all there, I generated a shareable link. On social media, I wrote one short post. If you ever wondered what happened at the memorial, here it is. I have nothing else to say, but everything to show. I pasted the link and hit post. Then I closed the laptop and walked away. Within an hour, messages started rolling in. Some supportive, some cruel, most just shocked. I ignored them all. I made tea, turned off the lights, and sat by the window listening to the rain. By morning, the post had been shared hundreds of times. A cousin messaged me privately. I knew something was off that day. I just didn't have the guts to say it. Another wrote, "You didn't deserve that, Laureen." But the one that made me pause came from someone unexpected, a reporter from a local station. "If you want to tell your side on record," she wrote, "we can make sure it's done right." I thought about it for a long time. I could picture my grandmother shaking her head. She never liked spectacle. She believed in quiet strength. I replied, "Thank you, but no." I didn't fight for attention. I fought for dignity. By mid-afternoon, the tides had begun to shift. Melis's original post disappeared, deleted, probably under pressure. The people who'd commented now pretended they hadn't. The ones who'd laughed behind closed doors were suddenly concerned. That's how hypocrisy works. It hides until light touches it. But even as the truth spread, I felt no joy. Just exhaustion. The kind that seeps into your bones when you've carried too much for too long. That evening, I sat on my couch with the TV on mute. A newscaster's face flashed across the screen, reporting on a real estate investigation, one tied to possible document tampering and misrepresentation of assets. I didn't need to hear the name. I already knew. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Silas. "Aunt Laureen?" I answered immediately. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm here." They're not talking. Not to me. Not to anyone. I stared at the message. The room suddenly too quiet. I typed back, "That's not your fault, Silas. None of it is. I'm proud of you." He didn't reply right away. When he finally did, it was just one word. "Thanks." I put the phone down and let the silence wash over me. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was heavy, deliberate, the kind that fills a house when truth finally breaks it open. For the first time since Grandma died, I felt something that almost resembled release. The story wasn't over, but I had taken back my name. The quiet felt louder than any scream Melis had ever thrown at me. The following morning, just as the sun began slipping through the blinds, I woke to a notification pinging on my phone. I had barely slept. Between the fallout from the Dropbox folder and Silas's message, the silence from Melis and my parents had grown too loud to ignore. I reached for the phone on my nightstand, still half-draped in the heavy quilt I hadn't bothered to straighten since tossing and turning most of the night. I tapped the screen. A tag on social media. From a cousin I hadn't heard from since before the memorial. My eyes adjusted to the brightness as I opened the post. It was a digital slideshow. One last toast to Grandma. The caption read, Melis must have sent it out at the closing dinner she organized with select family members. The ones who hadn't shared the Dropbox link. I tapped play. Image after image rolled across the screen. Old Polaroids of family barbecues, faded shots from Easter's past, birthdays with frosted cakes and matching shirts. Some were grainy, others freshly taken at the memorial dinner. Everyone smiling. Everyone visible. Except me. I watched closely, trying not to blink. Not a single picture had me in it. In group shots where I knew I had stood, the framing had cut off just before I entered the edge of the frame. In one photo, Melis and my parents stood arm in arm by the lake, Grandma's lake house, and I recognized the background. I had been standing just behind them, holding a plate of food. But that portion of the photo was cropped. Then came the photo that stopped me cold. A shot of Melis holding a wine glass, giving a toast. In the blurred foreground, a hand rested on someone's shoulder. My hand. The ring on my finger, Grandma's ring, was unmistakable. They had sliced me out. The slideshow ended with bold white text over a smiling group photo, the family that always stood strong. I sat motionless, the phone resting on my thigh. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I had been before. This wasn't just insult. It was deliberate erasure. They hadn't just wanted to exclude me. They wanted to erase me from the very memory of who Grandma was. My phone vibrated again. A call. Silas. I answered.
He was crying.
I could tell before he spoke. Aunt Lorene, he whispered. She said you never really belonged. I felt my throat tighten. She told me Grandma only pitied you, that she didn't love you. That's why they didn't put you in the photos. I let the silence stretch. I didn't want to lie to him. But I remember the kites, he added, his voice small but sure. I remember Grandma laughing. You were the only one who could get her to laugh like that. That memory pierced something deeper. Grandma, holding the kite string while I ran along the grass barefoot. The wind catching the tail, lifting it higher as Silas clapped. She'd stood behind me, one hand on my back, saying, Let it go higher, baby. Don't be scared of the wind. She never said a word about pity. She'd only ever said, You are my heart. Silas, I said gently, you know it's true. That's more than most people ever get. I miss her. I do too. After we hung up, I went to my bedroom, opened the top drawer of the old wooden dresser, and pulled out the broken photo frame from the memorial. The glass was still cracked. The photo inside had been wrinkled in the scuffle, but was intact. I sat on the floor with it in my lap. I had stayed silent too long. I took a picture of my bruised knee, still faintly purple from being dragged on the patio tile. I placed it beside the broken frame and the envelope with Grandma's handwriting. Then I posted.
No hashtags.
No drama. Just my caption. I was erased from your slides, but not from her heart. I didn't check comments. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted witnesses. That evening, just as the sun dipped behind the apartment complex roofline, I received a voicemail. It came from a number I didn't recognize, area code local to Tulsa. The voice was familiar before she even said her name. Lorene, it began. This is Ms. Doherty. I lived 2 houses down from Ione. We used to garden together.
She paused.
I could hear birds chirping faintly in the background. Your grandmother gave me something a few months before she passed. Said I'd know when to pass it on. Said you'd be the one to come looking for it, not in words, but in truth. Another pause. Then, I'm sending you a voice memo. It's something she recorded. I haven't listened. I didn't feel it was mine to hear. But I think now's the time. My heart pounded. I didn't breathe. The next message came through an audio file attachment. I sat down at the kitchen table, turned off every light, and hit play. Grandma's voice filled the room. It was soft, strained, but unmistakably hers. If you're hearing this, my girl, It means they tried to bury more than my memory. And I'm sorry. I never wanted to leave you alone in the storm. I put my head down on the table and wept, not because I was broken, but because she never abandoned me.
Not really.
Her voice cracked through the speaker, and it felt like thunder in a church. For a long while after the message ended, I just sat there, staring at the phone screen. My hands were trembling, and I didn't even realize I was holding my breath. Grandma's voice still echoed in my head, soft, uneven, but carrying that same firmness she always had when she wanted to make a point. The apartment felt too small to contain it. I pressed play again. "Laureen," she said, her voice weaker this time, but still unmistakably hers. "If they're hearing this, it means they've already hurt you. I want them to know you were the only one who stayed.
You showed up when it mattered.
The house, the money, the memories. I wanted you to have them because you earned them." The recording cracked as if the air itself had trembled. "I made copies of the will," she continued. "More than one. I kept one at the house, one with Thurman, and one sealed away with Mrs. Doherty. I knew what Maelys was capable of. I hoped I was wrong, but I suppose I wasn't." Her breath hitched before she spoke again. "If they changed it, Laureen, it's not just about money. It's about them trying to erase you. Don't let them. And don't let bitterness own you either. There's a difference between fighting for justice and living in hate. I trust you to know that difference." Then the static swallowed her voice. I sat still for a long time, the room quiet except for the low hum of my refrigerator. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I noticed. It wasn't grief this time. It was recognition. She had seen everything, predicted everything. I didn't know how long I sat there. The afternoon light shifted across the wall, fading into the gold of early evening. Outside, someone's lawn mower hummed faintly. The ordinary world carried on, unaware that mine had just cracked open again. I wiped my face, then opened my laptop. My hands felt steady, almost deliberate. I uploaded the audio file to a shared drive and titled it, "Her Words, Not Mine." For a few minutes, I stared at the progress bar inching across the screen. When it finished, I copied the link and drafted a post. She wanted to speak for herself. "I think it's time you heard her." I hit publish. At first, nothing happened. Then the notifications started flooding in.
Shares.
Comments. Messages from strangers. Some wrote simple things. "This broke my heart. She sounds so kind." Others wrote long paragraphs about their own families, their own betrayals. Within hours, a local journalist picked it up. Then 2 more. By morning, it had spread far beyond what I ever intended. Headlines with phrases like "Voice from the Grave exposes family fraud" started appearing on small-town news sites. Reporters called. Lawyers called. Even old friends I hadn't spoken to in years texted. "Laureen, are you okay?" That video, that voice. I was okay. For the first time in a long time, I was more than okay. I felt anchored. By late afternoon, I received a direct message from a lawyer at a reputable firm in Oklahoma City. "If you'd like to formally challenge the estate, we're ready to represent you. No cost unless we win." I stared at the message, then closed it without replying. I didn't know if I wanted to fight through the courts. The truth was already out there. Grandma's voice was louder than any verdict. Still, part of me wanted to make it official, to make sure her wishes were respected in writing, not just in spirit. As I was mulling it over, my phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "Don't bother coming to our house again." That was all it said.
No greeting. No signature.
Just that one sentence. I read it twice, then set the phone down gently. For a moment, the ache of what that house represented hit me. The childhood dinners where silence meant survival. The walls that absorbed every humiliation I wasn't allowed to name. Then I smiled. I whispered to myself, "Good. That house never felt like home." That night, I sat on the couch with a blanket draped over my legs and replayed the audio one last time before bed. There was something soothing about hearing her again, not as a ghost but as a guide. Every word reminded me that love could be steady even in the midst of betrayal. Before I turned off the light, I walked to my dresser and picked up the broken frame. I never fixed it. Somehow, the crack across the glass felt right, a scar that told the truth instead of hiding it. As I ran my fingers along the edge, I noticed something I hadn't before. The back panel of the frame was slightly loose. Curiosity pricked at me. I slid it open carefully, half expecting dust or nothing at all. Instead, there was another envelope tucked behind the photo. Yellowed, thin and sealed tight. My breath caught. I turned it over. This one wasn't addressed to me. On the front, in Grandma's careful handwriting, it read, "For Maylise, if she ever learns to listen." I sat down slowly, holding it like something fragile. For several long minutes, I didn't move. The weight of it felt heavier than all the others combined. What could she possibly have written to my sister? Forgiveness? Condemnation? A warning? Part of me wanted to tear it open right there. Another part whispered that it wasn't mine to read. But deep down, I knew I would. Some truths aren't meant to be buried. Some are meant to be carried. The envelope sat on my coffee table all night. I couldn't bring myself to move it. Every time I passed by, my eyes caught Grandma's handwriting, those strong, looping letters I could recognize in a heartbeat. For Maylise, if she ever learns to listen. The irony wasn't lost on me. Morning came, slow and gray. A drizzle tapped softly against the kitchen window as I poured coffee into the same mug Grandma used to drink from when she visited. I stood over the sink, staring out into the quiet street, her voice still echoing from the night before. I knew I shouldn't read it. I knew it wasn't mine. But something about that envelope called to me, not like a temptation, but like an unfinished sentence waiting for punctuation. I sat down at the table, placed the letter in front of me, and took a deep breath. My hands didn't shake this time. I carefully slit the top and unfolded the paper inside. Her words were short, clipped, but every line struck like a match. Maylise, you always knew how to speak, but never how to listen. I gave you every opportunity to see me, not as a symbol, but as a person. You were too busy crafting stories to hear the ones that mattered. You wanted the world's applause, but never once did you sit beside me when the lights were off. Never once did you ask me what I needed. You made the family name louder, but not stronger. You were born with everything, and yet, somehow, you still believed love had to be earned by performance. I don't hate you for that, but I grieve for the girl you were and the woman you chose to become. I paused. My chest felt tight. There was no bitterness in her words, only ache. If you're reading this, maybe something has cracked inside you. Maybe you're finally quiet enough to hear me. If not, I'm sorry. But Lorene deserved better from you. We both did. No signature. Just her name at the top, and that sentence hanging in the air like incense. I folded the letter again and sealed it in a fresh envelope. I didn't leave a note or add anything. I drove it over to Maylise's front door, tucked it under the mat, and walked away without ringing the bell. Some truths didn't need confrontation. Some wounds needed space, not salt. That same afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table again, this time with my laptop open. My inbox was flooded. Strangers, neighbors, distant cousins, all with some version of the same message. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I believed her. I didn't respond to most, but one stood out. A woman from Pennsylvania. She wrote, "You reminded me of my mother. She never fought back either, but she never gave up who she was. Thank you for showing what strength looks like without screaming." That one I replied to. The local newspaper published a piece titled, "The Quiet Voice That Broke the Legacy Lie." They asked for an interview. I declined. The truth didn't need my face anymore. It had found its own legs. By spring, I had moved into a small fixer-upper just outside Tulsa. It wasn't a lake house, but it was mine. The paint was chipped, the floors creaked, and the porch steps leaned left. But it breathed. I spent mornings gardening, afternoons volunteering at a nearby elder care center. The same kind of place Grandma had once said she'd never want to end up in, but later admitted felt like home when I visited. The women there liked me. They liked that I listened. One of them, Miss Ruby, called me the calm in the room. On my desk at home sat the broken photo frame, now repaired with gold adhesive, an old Japanese art technique I'd read about called kintsugi. Repairing cracks with gold to show that damage doesn't ruin something's worth. It adds to it. That frame reminded me every day that I had cracked, but never shattered. One afternoon in early June, I got a voice message from Silas. His voice was lighter, steadier. "Hey, Aunt Lorene, I told Mom I want to visit you next summer." There was a pause.
She didn't say no this time.
I felt my face soften. I replayed the message twice before sending my reply. "When you come," I said, smiling into the mic, "bring the kite. The wind here's perfect." I sat on the porch after that, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. The world didn't feel quieter anymore. It felt honest. I thought back to the memorial, to the house, the frame, the letter. They had tried to erase me. But the truth is, erasure only works if you stop writing. I hadn't. I wasn't erased. I was rewritten. And this time, by my own hand. Sometimes, the loudest revenge isn't a scream. It's the quiet dignity of standing your ground when the people closest to you try to bury you in silence. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice, even if you have to speak it alone. Have you ever been erased by your own family, treated like you didn't belong in your own story? Share your experience in the comments, and let others know they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe for more true